Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. My name is Ben,
And I'm Alice.
and this is episode 219. Hey, Alice. It's
Hey,
been a
Ben.
little bit of a moment since we've talked on the podcast. Last time we were catching up about our bodybuilding seasons, which I don't know about for you. It feels like for me, that was ages ago, and it continues to fly by the time since my season's elapsed. I feel like I'm finally getting to the point where I feel like I'm getting back to normalcy and just the kind of my everyday regular off season feeling myself again. So I'm enjoying that. But before we get into the topic today, which is the privilege of vegan bodybuilding, I'd love to know what's been going on in your world because you've got a lot of exciting projects underway and things that you're working on. So, what's new with you?
Yeah, first of all, I'm coming up to Massachusetts from the 5th through the 12th. So that'll be good to get to hang out with everyone in person. Other nuisance in my life is just allergies. I'm actually going to start allergy shots because it's been such a problem this year and last year. Yeah, I've got a lot on my plate. I'm starting my business, starting my LLC. And I'm going to be promoting my first bodybuilding competition. It's going to be in Hill City, Alabama, which is about 30 minutes outside of Birmingham. So, really, it is on October 25th. And I'm super excited. It's just like a lot to learn, and I'm loving every minute of it. And the OCB has just been so welcoming and so helpful. So, yeah, I'm going to have to start looking at finding staff soon. So, not actually like securing all that. That's sort of like really last minute, but I'm hoping to find some people local in Alabama. So that might be a unique challenge. So that might be why I'm starting that a little bit early. But so anyone down there listening and you have experience in the behind the scenes stuff at a bodybuilding competition, hit me up at alice@veganproteins.com. I would appreciate it. Let's see. Well, so I also signed up for a class to do some continuing education stuff. Not like I have enough on my plate right now.
This is
But
that class is that.
so it's the NASM Physique and Bodybuilding Coach. I signed up for it before and I didn't finish it, but I'm picking it back up and I hope to be finished with that course. Take the test here in the next 3 or 4 weeks. Fingers crossed.
Cool.
Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying about promoting, I loved the two shows that I did with the OCB, and we're not affiliated anyway, but of course, I guess now we kind of are because you're promoting for them. But we send people to whatever shows are kind of local to them usually. But I can say that the OCB shows that I did were definitely some of my favorite, and I felt like they were very well run. They were professional. There was a great crowd, a great atmosphere, and all the athletes really felt looked after and cared for, which I think is always a priority when you put so much time and effort in for that one day. You want that one day to feel special. You want to feel like, you're the star of the show for your moments that you step out on stage for. And I really feel like the OCB does a really great job of that and caring just genuinely for the athletes. So, do you want to give a quick plug for the name of your show and where people can follow along if they're interested in that?
Yeah, the name of my show is the OCB Hammer Forged, and it is you can we're going to open up registration pretty soon, hopefully. It's ocbonline.com, and on Instagram you can just follow the news and updates at OCB Hammer Forged.
And what's going on with your own personal bodybuilding journey? We won't, I know we kind of talked about maybe doing a series on that and seeing, going more in depth into our off seasons and how that's going since we did our longer kind of season recap. But just briefly, how are things on that end?
Yeah, things are going really well. Weight has finally settled, and I feel like a lot of stability in that realm. And training is finally starting to feel good again and feel exciting again. I have a pretty good amount of volume in my programming right now, and it's voluntary and just having fun with it. That's the biggest reason I have so much volume is just because I'm just enjoying it. Literally didn't even want to leave the gym last week, especially on Friday. I just felt like, oh, this is home, even though I was sweating buckets.
It's one of the best parts about bodybuilding for me. I enjoy the structure and the routine and all of those elements outside of the gym with nutrition and sleep and stress management. But what I really, really love and what keeps me coming back to it and why I know that I'll continue to do bodybuilding for, as long as I can see myself doing it is pushing yourself in the gym and pushing for those PRs or just I think it's about just like showing up and trying to get a little bit better every day or just bringing your best and giving a good effort every day because there's just I don't know what it is about it that just like the quest for something more, the potential of like seeing what you can do. Of course, there will come a point where you hit that inevitable peak. There's actually a couple of good Iron Culture episodes on that about like, how do you continue to stay motivated or going to the gym after you feel like you've hit your peak. But I feel like there's always little things you can improve upon. And it's one thing that I really like about Jeff Alberts, who's a member of the 3DMJ team, is he talks about like maximizing your current potential. And I think that's cool because that's something you can do at any stage in life. It's not about your peak necessarily, but it's like whatever you can do right now, can you do it to your best? And you can get a lot of satisfaction out of trying to see, what you can do within the context of your life. So I really enjoy that about bodybuilding, and I'm kind of getting similar to a point similar to you where I'm finally starting to enjoy the training again, pushing for the PRs, getting stronger, and thinking about how much time I still have to build and to continue that runway of growth. So I think it's exciting when you kind of get through that bridge period coming out of your season where it's like you still feel kind of crappy, you're not in love with the gym, things kind of hurt everywhere, you're just like a little bit burnt out. But once you kind of get over that hump and start getting back into like just everyday bodybuilding off-season life, that's I think where it starts to become really enjoyable again. So yeah, sometimes there will be these bridge phases where you're not always enjoying things. Like, it's been a while for me since I've really enjoyed training, probably since I started my prep. And now, it can take time to come back, but it feels really good when you have all that stuff going for you.
For sure. Yeah. And I feel like this is a really good segue into our topic. Just I think this attitude is this episode is going to be a lot about gratitude. And it's a beautiful thing. And, we live in a world where, gyms are abundant and we have this access to equipment. And yeah, I love talking about this. Great topic. I'm in a good spot. I'm finally in a good spot. And I feel like every month we kind of say, oh, I'm finally better. I'm finally better from competition. But then each month there's something new that you recognize and something more that you're grateful for. So yeah, the journey is just so rewarding.
I think we could potentially segue this, like you said, into talking about the privilege of vegan bodybuilding, which is our topic for today. I think there's a lot of places my mind go initially. There's the vegan aspect where people will say being vegan is expensive, being vegan is prohibitive, and then maybe even taking that even further and being like, well, if you want to be a vegan bodybuilder, then you have to eat all this protein and then you have to buy all these mock meats and that's expensive and that's prohibitive, or you have to buy a bunch, you have to live off protein powder. So I think there's that conversation to be had, maybe dispelling some myths, but then talking about what truths there are to the privilege of it. So maybe talking about the cost of competing and how that is a privilege that not everyone can afford to do. Maybe talking about, just the ability for us to choose what we can eat. Like we can choose to eat less or choose to eat more, where that's not always possible for some people who are, in less favorable socioeconomic positions. And then, the privilege of being able to pay to go to a place where they have all this equipment for us to exercise and move our bodies. And especially, us, we're maybe going to these like really niche bodybuilding gyms where they have all these fancy machines and equipment,
Yeah.
and just all the different tiers from like home workout, maybe, or like a Planet Fitness, all the way up to like these boutique gyms like an Equinox or a Lifetime or whatever it is. And just thinking about like maybe even why it is that exercise has become, or like going to a gym became a necessity, because people just used to have to work manual labor, and then things became industrialized and we became more sedentary and we started to eat more calories because of food processing and like the post World War II era. So you can see my mind is going a million different places right now. So where do you want to start this conversation?
Probably just talking about first starting out like the privilege of bodybuilding itself, because I feel like the vegan bodybuilding is something we can sort of build on. Being an athlete in general, I feel like is a privilege. Talking to people about that, being a competitor and someone who shares their journey is something that a lot of people look up to. Definitely earn a lot of respect from complete strangers. And then in the vegan aspect of it, you either kind of get sort of someone kind of snubbing you or someone kind of like in awe, like how in the world would that ever be possible? But yeah, just being a bodybuilder, being an athlete, I feel like the most shocking thing that a lot of my clients, a lot of my clients are lifestyle, but even the lifestyle clients are they start their training regimen and they notice the increase in energy and stamina, even though we are as bodybuilders sort of skirting the line of what's too much training and what recovery and balancing all that. But You get those physical benefits, you get mental benefits definitely from developing just grit in general. What about you? Do you think that you've noticed a lot of that?
For sure. Yeah. I'd say when I first started getting into training, even just, I mean, this is going to differ from person to person, but if you think about ourselves, like you're a pro with the OCB, I've been training now for coming up on 6 years of training. And in my first show, I placed, second in a pro qualifier, and just thinking about maybe the results we got from the get-go versus the results that some people may not get with similar levels of effort. That's something I think about a lot. Like if I had put in all this effort at the start and I got no results because of it, would I have like given up or kept going? It's hard to say, right? Like you'd want to say, yeah, you would, because we all want to believe that we have, a lot of mental grit and perseverance and toughness, and we would have stuck it out regardless. But it is hard to say. So I think about that. But yes, I would say when I first got into lifting weights and learning about nutrition, my personality attracted me to it for sure. I'm someone who I've always like dove full into something I've been interested in. So I was studying exercise science in school. I was really trying to figure out a way to just, increase my awareness of proper strength training practices and nutrition. Because, in my degree, we did some of that, but a lot of it was kind of more clinically focused, I would say. So we would touch on it, but I was really interested in learning more. So I just dove fully into that and started putting it into practice. And it definitely taught me a lot of things about determination and grit. And the first time I really like followed any sort of diet or meal plan, it was very strict. It was very regimented. I was very like black or white about it. And there were definitely downsides of that. There were maybe some upsides as well. And I think maybe some of those were just learning to like say no to certain things and build that willpower. And that allowed me to kind of ease things up eventually and got to the point that I am at now. So I think sometimes you have to learn a little bit of that discipline. But I totally noticed better sleep, feeling like I had more energy. Once I did a little bit of a probably too much of a crash diet to start out, but once I kind of figured out how to do things right, quote unquote, like what you're speaking to when people come to us and we can kind of get them on the right path, for sure, noticing, better energy. I actually noticed some of that stuff as well when I transitioned to a vegan diet. Like I noticed just little things like my skin clearing up, recovering better from in the gym, just feeling like more energetic all around. And I think there's lots of people who kind of feel that way. Maybe some of that is like inflammation related, or some of that is just eating more whole foods, better micronutrient intake. But yeah, I would say that is something that draws people to this lifestyle is, how good you can feel. And it really is a privilege to feel that way. I just remember when I had my lung collapse in 2022, just lying in the hospital bed, just thinking about like, oh my God, I don't realize how much I miss like being able to go to the gym and just move, or even just go for a walk around the neighborhood and get outside. Like you don't know what you have until it's taken away from you sometimes. And I just remember thinking about that and thinking about what about people who, maybe don't have the option to move as much because of chronic illness or conditions or whatever it is, and how good it feels to be able to do that, and how important it is to take care of your body, and how really it is a privilege. And I think sometimes framing it that way make you, like you said, have more gratitude for everything that we do, instead of it feeling like, oh, I have to do this, like my autonomy is being taken away from me, or it's a perceived lack of autonomy where you feel like you have to eat a certain, I have to eat healthy, I have to go to the gym. Kind of reframing it as like I get to do these things and viewing it as self-care. That's something I find myself talking to clients a lot about. Do you find that as well?
Absolutely. And I think you hit on a really good point as far as like having access to all the information that we have. We live in this like science-filled, fitness world that we have the privilege of being a natural athlete too, and again, getting the results that we get. I think of, our favorite podcast. I think of, the actual, you got to major in it, which is awesome. I wish I had figured out that this was my passion when I was young enough to get a degree in it, right? But yeah, it's clients are clients do a good job, recognizing that early on, especially if they are coming from sort of a sedentary style life to, one that's they have a regimented training program and they have a coach to help keep them accountable. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing. What else? I talked about privilege of being an athlete, the self-confidence that awards you, gaining that physical strength. Oh, and you talked about the difference between before you went vegan and seeing those benefits of like clearing up your skin and improve recovery. Although I went to the gym most of my life, thankfully my family really encouraged it. Growing up, I never really started trying to purposely build muscle until I went vegan. So I don't really have like a good like before and after comparison. But yeah, just finding that community was what really like encouraged me, and obviously getting a coach best thing to do when you're trying to get into bodybuilding because you just sort of start thinking, oh, I can just train in the gym and see these results, and it's going to be easy to put on muscle. That's sort of the thing that everyone assumes right off the bat, but you quickly realize it's not. After a year to 2 years of sort of spinning my wheels and not seeing a whole lot of results, it's like, all right, it's time to really, really dial this in and get some help and get some community. And that's when, started with the nutrition. You learn that the nutrition is really like the thing that's going to take you to the next level, learning to lift heavy, right? You think you're lifting heavy until you get a coach telling you, here's what heavy is. Well,
The,
so
the coaching I want to touch on for a second because that is a big one, right? Like, especially if you talk about, I mean, you could look at competitive bodybuilding or just kind of like the person who wants to make a body composition change. Both of those things probably benefit from coaching. And yes, you can, thankfully, we have access to lots of information these days, but it can be overwhelming for folks and they don't know how to kind of comb through that. And so getting a coach can kind of fast track your progress in a lot of ways and set you up for your future. And that's a privilege to be able to afford coaching. It is, right? In the day and age that we live in. And so I think that that takes acknowledging. Of course, if you have the time to educate yourself and kind of figure out for yourself, like that's another thing I think about. I came across pretty good information when I first started out, and having a educational background in reading research and in kind of deciding like, okay, is this someone I want to listen to or not? I was able to kind of detect some of the BS. But even I, was listening to people who like now I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole sort of thing. And so it takes a while to kind of find that. And so, that's a privilege is being able to have a coach and to go about that yourself and getting into like the competitive aspect of things. I think while it's on my mind, competing, if you actually decide to be a competitive bodybuilder, there is so much cost that goes into you might need to get a posing coach. Obviously, you're paying for registration for the event and the organization itself. Then there's all
membership.
the
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. There's all the suits that can vary based on what division you're in. All the things that go
Heels for
into
ladies,
heels for ladies.
jewelry, getting your
Yep,
makeup done, getting your hair
yep,
extensions.
yep. And that's just, that might just be one show. Then you think about like if you're doing multiple shows, if you're doing multiple organizations, it can add up
If you
quite
have to
quickly.
travel to that location.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Travel costs. So yeah, it can add up. So competing is not something that, we can take for granted as well. One thing that I actually forgot to touch on when you were mentioning it was having a family environment that kind of was supportive of you or just like community support. That's another privilege that I probably, sometimes can take for granted because my family was one that was more active growing up. My parents encouraged us to play sports or to be active in whatever way we enjoyed, whether that was more artistic, like through dance and movement in that way for my brother and sister, or my brother played multiple sports as well. Being able to afford playing sports, that's not always possible because there can be costs with that. So if you don't have a background of exercise growing up, you might be less inclined to get into it later in life, or there's more of a barrier of entry there. You didn't see those healthy habits modeled for you earlier in life. So I think that's kind of another privilege. Maybe people around you don't share those similar habits. So finding community can be really important, which I think actually is one thing that's nice about, identifying as a vegan, having a vegan label. You can find people who are kind of in that label. Sometimes if you're just maybe like a bodybuilder or a fitness enthusiast, it can be hard to like find your community. You might have something that's like local. You might be lucky where you have a gym that has a nice local community, but that's not always the case. And so being able to have an online community that is kind of like a niche in a way, I think is nice. And you can feel like you're on that journey with other people, especially vegans who tend to get slighted for maybe not being like super muscular or athletic, or, they get made fun of a lot in the general population. I think it's especially important to be able to have your community supporting you and encouraging each other.
Yeah, I think community is amazing. You want that kind of support. Oh, do you find that, do you find that you are able to encounter like other vegans that are just walking around like, the Massachusetts area? That's something that I always kind of think about. I live in a very rural area, and yeah, having access to that online support. Thankfully, also like the vegan community, the vegan strength community, being a niche within a niche. Since it's smaller, I feel like it's kind of easier to make those connections, at least on social media, and sort of everybody know who everybody is. And I would say it's overall a very positive one. But do you ever run into someone like in your area? Do you get lucky with that?
Would say it's pretty rare. Most of the connections I've made are, like you said, online because I think it's more tight-knit. People kind of know each other. You find people through other people. Oh, this person follows this person who follows this person, and you kind of like grow your bubble, so to speak. One thing that I have found is that when I wear vegan stuff out and about, I definitely make a lot more of those connections because I'm not somebody who's like a super go up, talk to everyone. Like that's my brother. He loves going up to people, talking to them, seeing asking about their life and their story. I'm more reserved. Like I'll talk to someone if, I'm not always the first one to initiate that conversation. So I think sometimes wearing stuff out in public, like over the past weekend, I marched in a parade in my hometown and I wore like bodybuilding vegan shirt. And somebody in the parade was like, "Hey, vegan, go vegan." And I was like,
Hmm.
okay, so that's somebody who, I didn't end up stopping and talking to them, obviously, because I was marching, but like that's a connection I would have never made if I had chosen to do that. I've had people come up to me in the gym and either ask me questions or to say, "Hey, I'm vegan too. That's cool." Like there's someone at my gym that I used to belong here locally in the Boston area who I met because of that. Or like I had a gym buddy who's then, "Oh, I got to introduce you to this other vegan lifter that I know at my gym because I wore a vegan shirt or he knows that I'm vegan." So times I've noticed that, but I think it is harder to make those connections in person. And that's why whenever there's like festivals or events near me, I definitely try to go to those and make connections there. And it's helpful that Danny and Giacomo live close by too, because I can go and be at the vegan proteins table and talk to people. But yeah, that's my kind of input with that.
Yeah, I think Carson really loves to wear all every single shirt he wears out in public. If he's not in like work attire, it's something to do with veganism or some silly vegan shirt. And he gets a lot of people approaching him about it, asking him questions. He's had a lot of positive interactions about it. Me, not as much. I think a lot of women might be nervous to sort of talk about fitness, or maybe they're, obviously being a female competitor, I feel like isn't something that is as common, just walking around running into one another. But I'll definitely, I'll be wearing vegan strong shirt out and about, and I'll have similarly to your parade experience, someone just another woman, vegan strong, yeah. And so we just have that moment. It's like, all right, you don't want to talk, but it's all right. So it was a special. That reminds me of the vegan cruise. Wearing the vegan strong shirts and the vegan protein shirts around the ship got a lot of attention, and that was fun. That was really fun. Getting to actually connect with like older vegans, being on the cruise line. Man, yeah, I wish it was more common. We love it when we have people come up and ask us questions. We've had the longest conversation I think I've had was actually in a Walmart. Someone coming up and just like literally being brand new and just asking all the nutrition questions that you can think of. And it's like I ended up just giving him contact information because it's like, all right, we gotta go, buddy.
That though, I love when someone's like curious and open-minded and they're just genuinely wanting to know more. The interactions, well, the people who are maybe more judgmental probably won't even come up to you in the first place and say anything, has been my experience. Like people, I don't know, I just don't get that many people who are confrontational coming up to me. I'll get some
Right.
people who like will maybe ask some questions or like, obviously the one that I've gotten the most by far, not even close, is about protein because everyone is always concerned about getting enough protein. So that's a conversation you have to be prepared to have many times over. And I feel like we have our own like elevator pitch of like, this is what I say every single time someone asks me. But even if someone's not ready to make, like, oftentimes people say, "Oh, like, I could never do that myself," or "I'm not ready to do that." I try to just focus on getting them whatever information I think is going to help them for where they're at in their journey and just pushing them a little bit more kind of along that spectrum. But most people have been pretty open-minded and excited to learn more. I think that would maybe be a good topic to go into is like people talking about, oh, well, like eating a vegan diet is like, overly expensive or, you have to eat mock meats, 24/7 or only protein powder, only processed foods in order to be able to, get good results. And so I think that can be looked at as like a privileged thing. Oh, like being vegan is a privileged take. I've heard that, or is a privileged thing to do. I've heard before. And I think there's lots of different ways to be a vegan and to eat vegan and different ways that you can do it based on where you live and maybe the foods that you ate growing up culturally and all these different factors. So what do you say to someone, or what do you try to how do you have that conversation when somebody's like, I'm concerned about the cost, or like I don't want to eat protein powder, or I don't want to eat mock meats, or whatever it is? How do you kind of have that conversation with someone?
I tell them the answer to that is learning to cook and telling them I cook probably 98% of my meals. And I'm not someone who loves being in the kitchen for a long time. So it doesn't have to be incredibly time consuming. Of course, my main thing that I talk about is seitan since I love it so much and vital wheat gluten. You can integrate it into your diet in a way that doesn't feel like all you're having is bro meals. Putting it in making your own protein bread or your own protein pancakes or your own protein mug cakes. I love vital wheat gluten. It's closer to a whole food. Of course, I talk about how much I love tofu as well because it's so clean and it's so filling, right? I genuinely tell people about how, every time before I go to work out, I have about a half a block of extra firm tofu, and that just makes me feel the best throughout my training, makes me feel full, satiated. I don't get hungry midway. I don't feel like I have to carb up in the middle of my workout. And yeah, and just being so creative with making your own stuff. And it's very, I order a lot of stuff online, but that doesn't mean it's expensive, not at all. Doing a big food prep, if I'm making like my chicken seitan loaves, I'll make a bunch and throw it in the freezer and work on that for sometimes literally months. So yeah, I mostly about wheat gluten and talking about soy, and if they're soy averse or if they have a soy allergy, telling them about Big Mountain tofu and having that conversation. That's pretty much like what I survived on during competition prep. Also very satiating, very clean. What are some of the things that you tell people about?
I'll talk to somebody and say, like, what is most important to you? Is it the taste factor? Is it the price factor? Is it the convenience? Those are usually the three things that sculpt our food choices the most: taste, price, convenience. And then, what are your goals? Do you want to eat more whole foods based? Do you not really, that's not super important to you? Obviously, we're still going to be eating lots of fruits and vegetables and grains and nuts and seeds. Like, we're still going to eat all of those things, but some people want to be like, that's all that I eat, or some people want to be like, no, I'll take a little bit more of a mix, or I don't really care. So I'll kind of find where somebody is on, on those end, because maybe, okay, we're leaning more on, lentils and beans, but that can be hard to digest. So maybe we need to do like a lentil pasta or like a black bean pasta or something like that. So, okay, can we go there? Are we open to doing a scoop of protein? We can find proteins that have more, that are cheap and have minimal ingredients. Often those two things go hand in hand, and that's great. You can get unflavored like pea protein or soy protein in bulk. You can make your own blends. I know you're a big True Nutrition fan, and you can kind of customize things that way, or you can kind of just buy from a bunch of different places and make your own and make it an experiment. So it kind of depends on what you're after. But I think if you know where to shop, you know how to shop in bulk and get good deals, you know what things to look for. For me, I think about the fact that I know so many people who, like, maybe they'll skip breakfast or eat a little thing at home. They'll grab a coffee on their way to work. They'll order out for lunch, and then they'll come home and maybe cook themselves dinner. I'm like, okay, if you're ordering DoorDash, Uber Eats, whatever it is, you're probably spending $15-$20 on whatever you're ordering. And I could easily get my full day of eating in under $15-$20, like no problem, probably like way less than that. And it's all about perspective, right? You don't think about like the coffee that you get every morning or how many times per day or week you're ordering out. But for us, we might go out once or twice a week, depends on the person, sometimes more, sometimes less, or get some takeaway or something. Most of the time, like you said, we're cooking our own foods. We're probably cooking in bulk to save time. I think once you learn the ways to be efficient, it can be cost effective, it can be nutritious, and you can hit all your protein goals and hit all your goals as an athlete. It's kind of more so about planning than anything else. So I think that's one of the myths I would say about, like, oh, it has to be super expensive or it has to be super complicated in order to get to your goals. I think that is one of the myths of like vegan bodybuilding being a privileged thing. There definitely are privileges, and we've talked about those, but this is, I think, one of them that could be worked around more easily.
Oh, for sure. I think it's great, like to bring up specific meals that I'll make that are just an example of something that's quick and easy. I tell people, I'm like, most of my meals are made in the microwave, and that doesn't mean that they're unhealthy or anything. I rely heavily on frozen veggies to, get nutritional variety and just out of sheer convenience, and they taste better. I find the brand that I like and I rely on that one. And, with microwaving my vegetables, I can make stir fry bowls, with my vegetable. If I'm cutting maybe cauliflower rice or maybe regular rice or sweet potatoes for a carb, and then having a protein source in there. And if you get bored of that kind of thing, just have different varieties of sauces. We're like the sauce king and queen here. We like to go And we'll go to a grocery store. It's like, oh, what do they have? And we're looking for something that's, around 60 calories for like 2 tablespoons of sauce and under. And you wouldn't believe, like we have crates of sauce that we go through. And let's see, we'll make wraps. So any kind of like sandwich that we like, if we're looking to make it lower carb, we turn it into a wrap. And similar thing, it's like you can get your protein wraps. You can lay down a bed of spinach, and you can lay down your protein of choice, whatever sauce it is you like. Sometimes I'll make a homemade tofu cheese if I'm really, really like tight on macros. We like doing soups, vegetable soups a lot. All that is really, really quick and easy to throw together. Sandwiches too, of course, but if I'm bulking mainly, I have the carbs for it. So just talking about specific things like, these things take us 10 minutes to whip up in the kitchen, and we have a ton of variety and getting plenty of nutritional variety, right? Staying healthy. It's a lot easier than you think. It just takes some planning and getting used to. And then before you know it, it's going to be natural.
Totally. I think the tip about frozen fruits and vegetables is a really big one because oftentimes if you're worried about the cost of your food, you don't want food to go to waste. And oftentimes you can find things that you wouldn't be able to have year round that are frozen that you wouldn't be able to get fresh or that would spoil really quickly. So you can find all these different kinds of fruits and vegetables, and often they're frozen at peak ripeness and peak nutrition, and they taste just as good like berries. I love fresh berries, but oftentimes, they're really expensive or they go bad really fast. And so having some frozen berries is a really great way to just put on your oatmeal or put into a smoothie. Even like canned vegetables and canned fruits in some instances can be good if you know what to look for. So I think there's ways that can make it convenient. Again, we're coming back to like convenience and price. And then you mentioned a good one, which is like making your food taste good, finding sauces that are you can just throw on different things that you don't always have to make from scratch. Or if you do want to make it from scratch, make a big recipe of it and put it in the fridge so you have it for the whole week. Yeah.
Or freeze it, right? We
Yeah.
rely on freezing things a lot too. People, they get really intimidated when you start talking about making your own protein sources. And so I say, if you just want to try some stuff that are really, really good, some of the just most popular things in the community, I just tell them, oh, my favorite brands. It's like, go try them. If you like them, maybe you can buy more of it and or learn how to make something similar. I always talk about daring chicken. I talk about Upton's seitan. I talk about tofurkey. Sometimes I'll tell people about just egg, even though it's not necessarily the most macro friendly. Although they did change the recipe recently, and it is actually a little bit better. Do you have some favorite brands that you'll name drop people? So be like, oh, go try this one.
I think all the ones that you mentioned are really are nice. For the cheese products, I really like Follow Your Heart for a lot of different stuff. It's kind of an OG
Mhm.
vegan brand, and I feel like they
Yeah.
make a lot of really good stuff. Same thing with like honestly, some of the Eves has been around for a while. They have some great stuff. Like Tofurkey has some good products as well. And then of course there's all these new brands that are constantly coming out with new products. So even if you don't necessarily
Unreal Deli, one of my
yes.
favorites. The newer
Exactly.
one.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So even if you don't live near like a Whole Foods or a place that carries all of these things, they're probably going to be in a mainstream grocery store near you more commonly, which I think is really cool. It's becoming more accessible, and there's less of a situation where you live in maybe like a food desert where you're not going to be able to, or a vegan desert where you're not going to be able to find this stuff. Still common some places, still it can be harder to find, but thankfully, we have Amazon. We have ways that we can order at least a lot of like the pantry stuff and hopefully get like, find somewhere where we can get produce and all the other stuff. I think you could probably get a lot of stuff online or make it yourself and just do kind of the more Whole Foods things you can buy locally. So, yeah, I'm thinking now about maybe transitioning to talking about like movement and exercise and ways that you can make that more or less like cost effective and lower the barrier to entry. Did you have anything else you want to touch on with nutrition before we maybe go into that?
No, just reiterating that, it's a privilege to have such a great knowledge of nutrition. And yeah, you do have to educate yourself an extra kind of like level up from being like regular bodybuilder to vegan bodybuilder. But it's so eye-opening, and it's so worth it. And yeah, it becomes easier and easier. So that was all. That was all I wanted to think about. But yeah, so just having access to so many gyms, so many box gyms. I mean, we have a Crunch Fitness up the road and we can get a membership for $15, right? Now it's super popular, right? So it's very crowded. So a lot of times if you have a box gym, you're weighing the pros and cons. I do have a bodybuilding gym now that is not expensive. It's $50 a month, but to some people that is expensive, right? And I don't have to, I feel like that lets me, basically I'm paying for not having to wait for a machine, right? I'm paying for having 5 varieties of the machines I like. What else? Just being able to get out in nature is a great way. You don't have to have a gym membership to get your cardio in. People love hiking. Take advantage of the parks that are around you, the beaches that are around you. What else? What else? What are you thinking?
Yeah, all great points. I'm thinking about just ways that people can get started if they're, super fresh or super new to this. Even if you're not in a place where you think you can commit or want to commit to doing a gym membership, you can just get a set of resistance bands on Amazon pretty cheap and start there. You'll definitely build some muscle if you're new to doing resistance training, and that's kind of the first place that you start. Maybe eventually you'll want to transition to getting a membership at something like a Planet Fitness or a Crunch, or if you really love it, going for one of those maybe higher end gym memberships. But you can start out with doing some like calisthenics at home with body weight squats or split squats, or holding like, rice bags or canned goods and putting them in a backpack. I'm just thinking about the pandemic and all the ways that people were like innovating, like doing curls with water jugs or whatever it is, or filling them with sand, finding things to pick up around the house that you can use for resistance training, taking a broom and, putting stuff on the end and making a makeshift barbell or something like that. You can get these little like under desk peddlers or steppers that you can do while you're working. And then if you can afford one, you can maybe get a treadmill desk. Those can be great if you live in a place that isn't as walkable. Like maybe you live in a place where it isn't as safe to be walking outside. Thankfully, most people have somewhere that they can walk. But if that's not the case, you can get stuff that you can do kind of in your home for pretty cheap. You can look up videos of at home, like little cardio circuits or things that you can do. And then if you're ready to graduate, you can go to a commercial gym, or you can get your own set of like adjustable dumbbells and a bench. Probably the higher end, like once you start building out your, I know people who have these elaborate home gyms, and that would be maybe like the highest end stuff because now you're purchasing all this equipment for yourself. But that can even scale. Like the amount of equipment that you have at home can scale up or down. So there's so many ways to include movement in your day, and I think it's becoming a lot more mainstream and accepted and popular for people to want to engage in exercise and activity. And I've seen that, I think, become more culturally adopted. People are recognizing there's not just one way to move, there's lots of different ways to move, and finding whatever way you enjoy and starting there. And it might change over time. You might start just walking, and then one day you want to go to the gym, or one day you're feeling good enough to try something more strenuous and you enjoy that. And so it's always kind of an evolution in finding what you're able to do, what's practical for you, and where can you start.
Yeah. And I think if you are one of those people that is just starting to go to the gym and you're like, well, what do I do? I always tell people, like, if you can just start with like 2 or 3 days a week and just doing like just your basic movements, and you can explore with this and figure out what your favorite things are. But listing the main compound list to them and being like, all right, find your favorite, form of either assisted pull up or overhead press, right? Some kind of row, some kind of bench press, and each day choose either a squat or a deadlift, and like you rotate through these things. And it can be fun figuring out what you like and what kind of modalities you like, if you prefer a machine or if you're brave enough to pick up that Olympic barbell if it makes you feel like Superwoman or Superman, right? And then just, yeah, being consistent with that. And those kinds of things aren't going to take you a whole lot of time. If you're just going in and just hitting like the, 5 or so lifts every day, and you're going to see a lot of results at first. You're going to get a lot stronger. It's going to build your confidence. And yeah, we have so many choices. We have the privilege of choice and options and variety.
I would say even with 2 days a week of 30 minutes, with some smart programming, doing like, paired supersets and stuff like that, you could
Mhm.
make a lot of progress. I think for somebody who's just starting out at the gym, you could probably go for a year straight doing that program and make really good strength gains and physique gains. And we're talking about an hour a week, out of how many hours we have every single week. I forget the exact number, but it's a lot. And just setting aside that 1 hour, I think I would be hard pressed to find anyone who couldn't set aside at least at some point breaking it up like an hour throughout their week just to move, and making time for that and prioritizing that again is something that is you have to view it as a privilege, an investment in yourself, and something that you're doing that's good for you. And once you kind of make that commitment to yourself and you start seeing those benefits, like we were talking about at the beginning, I think you become to you start, you get sold on it, and
Mhm.
you just have to kind of get started. And sometimes that can be the hardest part, is just getting started.
Yeah. And even, 2 days a week, you could just edit, you could just do, just weekends if you wanted, or you could do a weekend day and whatever tends to be your least stressful weeknight, it's like, all right, this will be a good night to just, consistently go. And 2 to 3 times a week, it's it. You'll become part of your routine before you know it. And I think taking a approach of learning and figuring out how strong you can get without getting some professional help, I think that's really fun for a lot of people. Yeah, just jump in and start trying some stuff. That's my best recommendation.
I think where people run into trouble is when they start feeling like they have to take everything to the max from the get-go. Like they have to be perfect, they have to, or they look at people that they maybe aspire to be like, and they see that they're going 5 or 6 days a week or training for 2 or 3 hours in the gym, and they're counting their macros to every single degree and whatever, all the things that they're doing. They view that as like, oh, that's the barrier that it takes in order for me to get good results, not even to get results like they got, just to like get good results for myself. And so they don't even try because they view it as like, oh, this is what it takes. And that is, I think, again, kind of coming back to maybe some of the misconceptions that people have about what it takes to be a bodybuilder or a vegan bodybuilder. And there's so many different ways to do it, and you can make it work for you. Find be honest with where you're at and find what are those next steps that you can take in order to get you there. And if you're not sure, that's where we come in at Vegan Proteins. Did you have anything else that you wanted to kind of add or add to the conversation before we maybe wrap things up?
I bringing up the vegan cruise. It was really neat being able to see people like Gregor and Barnard like in person. And one of my favorite talks that I was able to attend, talking about just the superior, like how much better plant-based protein is as far as like less inflammation. And you touched on this for your recovery purposes, but just for like total body health, even the mock meats, they basically have been mislabeled as a ultra processed food. And so we did a lot of sort of deep dives into that and the various aspects of that in the lectures. And even though, they have some, added ingredients that aren't ideal, overall they're just like, I mean, leaps and bounds proportionately, healthier and cleaner and less inflammatory than your meat protein sources, right? So having the ability to just live in a more recovered state, being able to improve your health and eat as much protein as we do on a plant-based diet, like another privilege, right? Do you have anything you thinking about with that?
It's a great point. I think, there's 20, I think, super like long-term studies looking at intake of animal protein versus plant protein. And it's like with more animal protein, lifespan usually goes down, and with more plant protein, it usually goes up. And so when I hear that, I think it's just reemphasizing that even if someone's not ready to fully make that switch, the more that they can kind of displace or switch some of these things in your meals, can you take out the ground beef and do some TVP or some veggie crumbles? Can you do like, yeah, a meatless Monday? Can you try to go plant-based for one meal a day? Even making those small changes, I think, can be a big can be a big deal. And you might be able to see the benefits of doing those, on your health markers, like maybe your cholesterol goes down or your blood pressure improves or your lipids improve, whatever it is. So I think that the more that we can encourage people to go along that spectrum, that's a positive thing.
Yeah, we have so much science now that's proving that you're going to get equal gains in strength and hypertrophy, and you're going to have improved recovery and reducing your chance of all of the big major diseases that sort of linger over society and cause so many early deaths in our country. And yeah, again, having access to all the science, knowing that what you're doing is not only good for your body, but also for the animals. It just feels good. It feels good. It's so much privilege, so much to be grateful for.
Does. And it doesn't feel, we don't feel like it's a restrictive lifestyle for us, right? So many people have that perception where, oh, I could never do that because I would feel restricted, or, it's like we love doing these things. We feel good about them. We there's so many pros, and we get to know that we're going to have a better chance at living a long and healthy life and being, in harmony with those around us and those that we share the planet with. So there's just so many benefits there. And I think that if everyone could get a little taste of it, they would probably see that for themselves. So if you're not sure how to get started or what changes to make, that's what we do here at Vegan Proteins. So if you're interested in getting in touch with us, you can head over to veganproteins.com and you can hit the contact button. We'll get back to you ASAP and let you know what options we have there. You can head over to Instagram and check us out at Vegan Proteins, at Muscles by Brussels, at Vegan Proteins Alice, and at Ben A. Mitchell to check out our content. We're posting stuff regularly on those platforms. But yes, the best way to get in contact with us, coach at veganproteins.com. And again, this has been the Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels radio. My name is Ben.
I'm Alice.
And we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks everyone for tuning in.